Good evening, everyone. I'm basically the last one, right? The last speaker of the day. So just please survive for another 30 more minutes. Then we all can go back and rest, all right? Actually, just to be honest, right, I'm not sure that I'm actually at the right talk or not because I saw the IPC and use case. I actually want to apply for the use case part, but we just go along with it. And if anything, just a chill session for the evening, right? All right, so the one, a little bit about myself. My name is Iqbal. So I'm actually for today not representing for my company. It's actually is representing my community. So we basically a builders community, right? So we are a group of programmers that actually build a lot of applications. So some of the things that we built before is under IoT. We build about robotics, right? We build a lot of enterprise system and so on, right? So one thing is that we just came in like 2 years ago. We actually deal a lot with blockchain products, and one of it is a Filecoin, right? So we actually merge between Filecoin ecosystem or tools together with what we call this use case, right? Problems that are actually in the real life industry. So all the use case that we actually build is for this. And for today is actually, we're going to talk about a long-term storage for a ChatGPT-like, right? So I assume everyone here have used a ChatGPT before, right? So I think it started is that one of the community member is actually build out an open source, what we call this NLP, natural language processing, right? So I'm with the team, the community, all that. We all originated from Malaysia, right? So in terms of NLP, we don't have a very specific NLP that actually for Bahasa Melayu. There's actually a language for Malays, right? We have for Indonesia, we have for Singapore, but English and so on, but we don't have for Malay. So we one of the team member from the community, we started the project for NLP. What happened is that like the project actually grows, and we have a lot of clients that actually coming in from enterprise, right? So we have a Malaysian enterprise that actually using a system because we are basically the only one that actually provide an open source NLP in Malays, right? So, but that's where the problem started. As it grows, then the infrastructure grows as well, right? And just a little bit for everyone that are not clear about NLP or LLM model, right? So you guys, you need the explanation, the LLM model for it. You guys clear about it? All right, so you can skip about it. So just to be clear, right, we have a lot of LLM model, right? Even ChatGPT 3.5, I think some of you guys have known, 4, right? Then the new one coming out is 5, right? So there's a lot of models, right? So the lot of models that are able to do for a lot of things. So this is where things can become more interesting, right? So one of the biggest advantage of using what we call this LLM model is actually a long-term memory. A long-term memory is that same experience that when you try to chat inside your ChatGPT, right, they can remember things, right? So when they remember things, they can basically respond back, like say like, hey, my name is Iqbal. So they will remember it. Then next time when you call it, they will know. But the biggest problem is that when you create a new channel, when you create a new session, they don't remember it. It's basically you need to keep restarting fresh for all the data, right? So this is the mechanism for retraining. The long-term memory are not actually stored in what we call, not actually stored inside the model itself. It will actually stored separately. So currently, in terms of the infrastructure, I use like Elasticsearch cache system for the data, right? So, and these data are not considered as important data. So all this enterprise, all that, they more tendency to delete and remove all the data. But at the same time, in terms of limit, they are only able to install about 1,000 memory at a time. So if you go more than 1,000, then the models go haywire because that is too much data and things like that. But long-term memory was the biggest problem in terms of the storage. So how we actually solve it, that we move. Okay, sorry, before that. So currently, this is a simplified version of the whole infrastructure, right? So in terms of the infrastructure is that like we have a servers and the model training is being separated, right? So this is where the memory is. Okay. and that we need to have a separate server that actually storing a data set, right? So what happened is that like this is one, the training is actually done separately from the backend server itself, right? So because this is the part that you need the biggest GPU, but in terms of execution, the model, you just need to have a minimized computation in terms of that, right? So, and it able to access on the app level. So any of the communication back to the models like chatting, whatever you write, all that, be going back to what we call the memory, long-term memory, right? So some of the long-term memory is actually stored back inside the model training to increase the, not to increase the probability, so to increase the efficiency of whatever we talk about, right? So they remember it. But this actually rises up to a certain sum of the problem. So one of it is in terms of running a machine learning inside a single node, right? It's a very high cost. So actually for smaller startups, right, like us, it's a very high cost to maintain. Just to give you a gauge about how much is the cost that we are maintaining on that part, is that just for indexing of the data set part, costs us about $9,000 a month, right? That just from Twitter alone. And we're only covering about 15% of the data. Right, the reason is why the best way for us for NLP to learn is actually from Twitter. That's how people read. But this is where things become more interesting. We are not the only one that indexing the Twitter, right? So all other NLP are actually doing the same process, right? But this data are not being shared. Everything is centralized by their own, right? So the cost of running this, I mean, if you are coming from AWS, you are Google, yeah, you love it because that's the money generation. Right? But for a company, for a startup, this is where the cost becoming a problem, right? So the smaller startup cannot afford to run on that part. The second part is data redundancy. This is the one that I said about data redundancy and data migration. So it means that indexer, if you want to read from blogs, you want to index crawling a data from the web, blogs, so on, all that, right? So the cost is very high and it takes a long time to do the same process. This is some things that I'm not sure. This is something new actually, right? So your LLM model, with the same data set, you can run the same data set to a different LLM model and you get a different result. Okay, I think the good example that people are complaining, now ChatGPT doesn't feel good as when they started it. You guys realize it? Because they run on a different model, but they are training on the same data set. So this is the problem on the industry per se of a machine learning, right? Every time you train it, the model, all that, the model keep changing. The response keeps changing, right? But the problem is that you are stuck with the same model over and over. It means that you are ChatGPT, you are stuck with that. You can give an option about 3.5 and 4 if you go for 5, right? But to retrain the model, all that is high cost and actually are not very feasible in the long run, right? And lastly, it's not real time. So it means that when you train the model, again, back to the infrastructure process, the training are not done at the node itself. So it means that like ChatGPT itself, you actually have a data set or whatever you can respond up to 2021. Any of the latest data are not being covered in terms of that. Right. So this is the proposed design that we actually build up right now, currently by the team. Okay, one thing that just to be clear, right? Again, like I said just now, IPC is something new. I knew about the IPC before. So, but before we started with the IPC, we actually expect to do this in FVM, right? So, okay, just to be story a little bit on this, but before the FVM, we are looking for a data computation, right? So, data everyone, I think it was early stage of the development. Everything is still haywire left and right, but they actually have a project called Fluence Network. So we actually work a lot with Fluence Network at that time. We still are a good partner with them until now, right? Until the FVM came in, right? So FVM was released, I think, in February, right, this year. So the whole infrastructure have FVM in mind, not IPC. That's why I mentioned it in the beginning of my talk. I might have the right talk or not. But after hearing about the IPC, I think it's something that definitely we're going to look at, right? Just to explain a little bit about the infrastructure. So it means that what we want to do is to expand out the long-term memory and the model. I mean, at one point in the future, we might to expand the data set part, right? So what we want in terms of the model, because we want to solve the problem of one model one data set, one model, and one application can be used. We want that users should have the ability to change to different model that they have, right? So you can ask a ChatGPT to write you a love letter, right? But it's not as good maybe for a model B that actually doing it. So you want to have the ability to keep changing it, right? But this is where the unique part that we actually store. So the model is actually stored inside the IPFS itself. That's one things that we actually look at. So in terms of the execution, the extraction of the data are being pulled out from the model. So it means that as a user, we give them the freedom to choose whichever model they want to use, depending on the needs they want to use, right? And in terms of, and all this execution, we go back to the IPFS in terms of the long-term memory, because what we are looking at is that the memory, even though it's doesn't impact a big scale of the project, but at the same time, it gives you some values in terms of how you're going to communicate at the end of the day, right? Especially personalization of the data, or mostly personalization of the data, right? So the two parts that we actually stored the data inside the IPFS is one is the train model, another one is a long-term memory. But right now we're actually looking at if the data set can be shared, right? The problem that we arise that, especially working with corporates and so on, all this, their data set are very close, right? They don't want to share the data or things like that. So, but this is one thing that we want to see, that if we can have a shared data, definitely we can reduce a lot of the cost in terms of training of the model, but it gives you more flexibility in terms of the usage at the end of the day, the execution of the model itself. So in terms of the benefit on the new infrastructure that we build, that this is the flexibility, the freedom. That's the first things that we are trying to look how to decentralize the whole LLM model, right? So it means that we want to open source, have the freedom, let the user have the freedom, let the dev choose whatever the freedom in terms of using it. The second part is that data availability and redundancy. This is the one that I said, that the sharing of the data economy. Data mobility, the movement of the data. Let's say, example that I said, the storing the long-term memory into a centralized place. Not centralized, decentralized, so able to be accessed by any of the model and the applications. I think last one is the data integrity. Because that storing the data, like we want to be like the user to be like, is the model is a correct model? Is the model is a working model? Things like that. I mean, this is some of the works that we actually plan to build, again, open source project that on top of the project is personal assistance, a decentralized personal assistance or a chatbot. Because right now is that, again, is an app specific. So with decentralizing the whole back end in terms of that, you can actually take the bot inside a Telegram, take a bot inside a Discord, take a bot anywhere that you like, right? Social media, this is actually for recommendation, filters, spam, anything that require on the long term. It means that if I go to Twitter, because right now, if let's say that you are using in the Twitter, you are using in any of the social media, it's very specific in terms of recommendation, depending on what your usage inside that. But it can move along with you wherever they are on that part. And this fraud detection is more on the enterprise level, the fraud detection, right? Right. Thank you very much. No question. Is there any question? Oh, yes.
You mentioned that you're using the FVM under the hood.
For the data DAO.
For the data DAO. How's been your experience so far?
Honest or?
As honest as possible.
Okay. Before I answer that question, can I just go a little bit backward? Like my story about Filecoin, right? I love Filecoin, but at the same time, it's very annoying. Again, I'll be honest here, because I just told Mikhail just now the story that I came for blockchain is because of Filecoin. Because I came from a background of enterprise. I came from a background of robotics, right? We do a lot of these microservices. So I always look, the infra is always good, right? But I always look at what's the end user going to be, because I always be at the end user side, right? You are talking about game engine just now. Right, but what is the end user? Yes, I build games. We actually have a project that we build games, right? So the experience of building things, right, is for Filecoin, because you guys are very rapid in development, right? Again, like I say about Fluence, FVM, now with IPC, it's like everything is like going as a fast. So we have a tendency of, let's say we choose one, it's hard for us to stick to one. Right? Example that I stick with the Fluence originally. We stick to the Fluence in terms of the development. Then suddenly FVM came in, is a lot better. All right, let's move our infra to FVM. Right, then FVM was coming a bit later on February. We start the development for this, I think it's about around September. Then we asked them, is it production ready? I think I did ask that question. It's like, is it production ready? But it's not. Then, okay, we wait for it. Then after that, like, it was on February, it was launching. It was launching. But come another problem. Some of the feature we want, it was not there. All right. I mean, yes, it's released as a public. That's why I just told Mika about it. Like, it's public, but because that time we are looking for a cron actor. Right? Because cron actor is cron actor is a very powerful, especially when you're coming from a user point of view. Right? Because we want to automate the process. Because this is the things that I have a conversation with Mika just now. Is like, we as an end user builder, we don't like to build things. That's why like projects like AWS, Google's is very, very powerful because who want to build back another user management system? Who want to build back another S3 data storage? We want to keep reusing whatever they are available. So back to the question, to answer your question about FVM, it was starting out as a horrible, right? Because originally when we start studying the FVM, it was Rust, right? Suddenly it changed to Solidity, then we get confused.
For the same.
Huh?
IPC software the same.
Yeah, I was, from the whole day conversation, I was like, okay, I start looking at it. But it solves a problems that we need. That's somewhere around the line. But I guess, me as an end user, end builder, I would call it towards the end, the experience is not really what we call efficient in that sense. I guess the word is, I'm not sure it's the right word that should I use, but yeah, things like that. Hopefully, I mean the needs is better than we can still bear with it. What I can say, we still can bear with it for now. All right, thank you. Any other questions?
Yes. How do you plan to use IPC?
All right. To be honest, I have nothing yet in mind. Again, I just started, like, everything is happening very fast right now, right? But looking back, right, one of I think definitely if coming from the end side, transaction per second is the most important part, right? Because if you want to work with enterprise, you want to work all these projects, I think if you work with, if you ask any of this end user, end depths kind of thing, right? The only question that we ask, right, what kind of speed we are looking at? Because we need to replicate back in terms of if AWS can give you that speed, then we need to give you, if not as fast as Visa, we actually a little bit less. Like Visa right now, I'm taking 15,000 per second, right? So in terms of IPC, I'm looking at more of building it as, in terms of the TPS is one thing I look at, right? The second part is that maybe the organization of the data right now, the one that I said just now, right? I mean, right now with the data, everyone can solve it on that part, but I see that maybe, but it's on the, again, I'm not really aware about what's the main feature. I haven't fully go in depth in terms of this part, but having a network just for a model itself, it seems like a more feasible move rather than just a general kind of thing. I'm not sure.
Yes, and you can use the same great FVM experience inside IPC as well.
Yeah, when I saw just now that you can basically have an FVM actor and basically it's the same experience that when we do like contracts or FVM, things like that. Yeah, hopefully things going to be smooth after this on the next iteration of the development, but see how on that part. Right? Oh, yes.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like when you say you put your data to IPFS and the model to IPFS, so usually the data or the model is very valuable. Because if your model is very good, you can sell it to others. So if you put it on IPFS, it's literally public. So in that way, does privacy concern to you, or it's just purely out of like open source initiative, and you're not considering monetary values at all?
All right. All right. I think that we have a lot of that question coming out, especially on enterprise level, right? But we as a community itself, we believe in open source. The open source is the one. I mean, we are developer ourselves. We work a lot of open source project to actually throttle out in front to push up more on these tools for the humanity, right? In general. So for the data that we actually propose to put in, like the model or that, we actually try to focus a lot on more like good social goods kind of models, people that can be used in the public, right? Not per se. Example, like because we actually take up like example Twitter data. Okay, taking up with Twitter data is basically general because anyone can pull it, right? Then we train the model to be able to speak in Malay language, right? So that is a general use case. Before that, the model are only available for this Malay language model was only available in AWS, it was only available in Google Cloud. Yes, the partner that actually work on that, we actually work with these people to deploy the model, right? But at one point we feel that this model should be able to be accessed by anyone. That's what we believe on, right? So yeah, to answer the question, we actually try to restrict in terms of what kind of data, especially enterprise level, we don't actually put it inside the public, but most of our projects or things that we try to build are more on the social goods kind of path.